We're back. We're back here at the Open Line Radio Show on KIEE 88.3 FM. Like always, Brother Jay apologizes because he's always running short on employees. Our sister Khadijah is out today. We appreciate her. But, I'm manning the board, the television cameras, because we're live on AOC Community Media. Shout out to them. Lafayette Premier Public Access Station. Shout out to William and Brother Shaheed. Listen, we have on the line, without any further ado, we had a candidate from the newly created 6th Congressional District, Mr. Cleo Fields, on last week. But I don't want to give Cleo no advertisement today. I want to let this brother tell us about himself, a young brother to my liking, reading his bio and reading what he stands for. Hopefully, there'll be a very competitive race for this new district, and we're going to welcome Brother Quentin Anderson, if I'm pronouncing it right. Welcome to the Open Line Radio Show. Yeah, well, that's what we need. That's what we need in public service, to wear many hats in our community. And I saw your platform. I saw what your intentions are. And I think it's genuine that we have fresh, new young faces to the game of what we sometimes, when we have some of our regurgitated politicians, no swipe at anybody special. But tell us a little bit more about you and your platform.
Well, yeah, and I think that's one of the main reasons why I'm running, is because not only do I think that we could use new ideas and new leadership, but especially when I'm talking to voters, particularly old folks. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that are saying that we need to move aside because it is time for a new generation to step up. And so I hope that I'm answering the call, and I hope that I'm doing it the right way. But yeah, I'm a small business owner. I always like to emphasize how small of a business owner I am, because my business is not an Amazon or an Intel. My business is doing graphic design and web design and doing commercials for small businesses. For me, like a lot of small business owners, my business is my full-time hustle, and my full-time job is my side hustle to support my full-time hustle. So that's kind of been my life since I got out of law school in 2013. I went to LSU Law School, and before that, I got my undergraduate degree from Louisiana Tech University. And before that, I'm a proud graduate of McKinley Senior High School here in Baton Rouge. And so really, since I got out of school, it's just been service. I've worked either for nonprofits or, like I said, with my full-time job, it's kind of just been dedicated to helping small businesses and nonprofits look a little bit better than maybe their budgets would suggest.
Mm-hmm. And what pushed you to run in this particular race? I know it was highly contentious with the system, with the political climate, with the history of Louisiana. So many factors play into a person making a decision to run for office. What drove you to this point?
Yeah, so sort of piggybacking on what I was just saying, part of my career has been helping organizations, but also politicians, frame their messaging, being able to talk to people beyond just the folks who already support what they believe in. And in that work, one of the things that I realized, one of the things that I observed, was that districts like this, majority Black districts, whether you're talking about at the federal, state, or local level, are often represented by people who look like us and have been in power for a very long time. And in politics, that length of time, that seniority, equals influence. And for anybody else, that influence means that your district is getting most of the perks. Your district gets the better end of deals. And yet for us and our districts, it's our districts that are the ones that are most disinvested. It's our districts where the schools are shut down. It's our districts where the roads look like crap. And I asked myself, why is that? But then you see it in the work that I've done. You see it behind closed doors. Our leaders simply do not represent our interests to the best of their abilities, because they know in our communities we're used to a history of disappointment. So they know they can go back to us and they can say, man, you know how them white folks are. I tried my best, but just couldn't pull it off this time. And we'll accept it because we're expecting disappointment. The problem is it's the racism of low expectations. Our leaders play into that. They know going into those negotiations, they can get away without delivering. And so they may not cut the best deal for the community, but they cut a good deal for themselves. That's how the district can be disinvested, and yet they'll be the powerful chairman of the education committee, or they'll be able to lead the redistricting effort, and yet they can't even get the trash picked up, or they can't even fix our roads. That's because they're not using the political capital they're accruing for us. And so I want to run because I actually value our people. I value our people as much as, any other representative values their people. I'm going to fight for us. And I know that we can get better deals than we've gotten because I don't share that same, no offense, but the blackness that I think sometimes permeates some of our older leaders who just have always gotten used to disappointment in the negotiations. And so they've started to go into the negotiations, compromising on our interests before the conversations have even started. I don't share that same baggage. I don't have that same perspective. I'm about as pro-black as it gets in the sense that I don't think that a black vote or a black constituent matters any less or is valued any less than a white one. I'm going to fight just as hard for them.
Well, and and again, our show we break it down, and we keep it real. Discussion with a younger brother, and we have come to the conclusion that looking at the state house, Louisiana State House, and that's just my opinion, and I'm gonna try to guide you from where my question is going from there. We have said that our elected black officials, our black caucus, is no more than a bunch of elected celebrities. Meaning, when we see them, we'll take a photo with them. Everybody will celebrate them in the community. But when they get to Baton Rouge, do they have any self-worth in the sense that they're doing something? This particular climate in Louisiana, this governor just signed the anti-seat RT law on yesterday, whatever the hell that means for him. But we don't have anyone saying, look, the black caucus need to at least stand on business. Even though we don't have the votes, we need to call a press conference and say, this is wrong with Jeff Landry and those extreme right-wing conservative. That's just me. And I've been identifying, but way before he got elected, that he is hell-bent on being some form of a white supremacist. So I'm saying the black caucus stand on business, call a press conference, tell the community this is wrong. But to give the illusion that you're in Baton Rouge and you're getting along with these people and you're not really getting anything for your community, you're putting in laws against that particular community, and that's what gets people like me upset as far as having platforms to speak on. And I never mince my words on things like that. So I don't know what's your opinion on that. We have to do better in Baton Rouge and Washington, D.C.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think you made a good analogy. I like the phrase that we're just sort of electing celebrities. We'll take pictures with them, but that's about it. Because that manifests itself during elections. I was just talking to a pastor in Shreveport, and he said that when he got started, doing community engagement and community organizing, he was very idealistic. But after generations of interacting with politicians, regardless of if they look like us or not, he's become more transactional. And what he meant by that was he does not, and nor do many people in our community, expect these politicians to do anything after Election Day. And so what ends up happening is, all right, let's get transactional. If I don't expect a politician to do anything for me after Election Day, then I'm going to side with the politician that at least is putting money into the community prior to Election Day, at least the one that's going to pay, for my church's vans to have gas and to be able to get people to the polls, at least for the candidate that's going to, give a bunch of my friends and family a $15 an hour job to drop off literature, at least the one that's going to spend some money with my media company or something like that. And so we end up before elections, kind of, no offense, selling our souls to the highest bidder because we don't expect anything afterwards. And then we're disappointed afterwards when the real work begins and they're nowhere to be found. And we have a mutual obligation there. We can't devalue ourselves so much that we lower the expectations for our leaders and we then let them walk right into those expectations. We have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. We have to believe that we can elect the very best and the brightest, that we can elect people that will, as you said, stand on business when those doors close. And right now, we don't believe that would have any effect, so that's not the priority.
Yeah, and chopping it up with State Senator Cleo on last week, one of the same things I'm going to mention, my brother, to you, the metrics guiding Louisiana, or the metrics that's happening to Louisiana, are dismal. Consistently last at the bottom. And I don't know how much influence on the federal level, being in Congress, can help Louisiana get out of this thing. Because if we keep having the same, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, I'm a registered independent. I'm going to say that. I say it all the
Yeah.
time. Whether or not whoever in power, whether it was John Bell Edwards or whether it was Bobby Jindal and anybody before them, we still have the same metrics. It still average out to the same 47, 48, number one in negative stuff, number one in violence, almost. But shouldn't that be a wake-up call for our elected officials on the state and federal, local level?
You would think so, but you were presuming that common sense and practicality are the ruling ideology in politics, and that is not the case.
Right.
Look, I think the thing that people don't always understand about the status quo is that the status quo, for anybody who has gained any sort of influence, any sort of cachet, any sort of standing, that clearly means that even if they can acknowledge that the status quo isn't perfect, it is in some way, shape, or form work for them. And so as soon as you start to threaten the status quo, all of a sudden people that you didn't expect start to defend it. The status quo for a lot of leaders in this state is okay because of what I just told you before. They can advance personally without actually having to deliver professionally.
Right.
And as long as that is the case, as long as we keep reelecting folks that don't deliver for us, you're going to keep getting the same results that you get. And the reason why our state is mired at the bottom is because of the political culture that we have here. The reason young people leave is because, when laws here are passed that feel more like things that would have passed maybe during the slave codes or Jim Crow, as opposed to 2024, nobody wants to live there. Nobody wants to start their family there. Nobody wants to start their career there. When, the Supreme Court is allowing you to, explicitly poison Black and brown communities, and you're in a state where there's clearly complicity between state government, local government, and oil and gas companies in their treatment of Black and brown communities, nobody wants to live there. As long as our political culture remains mired in just explicit attempts to marginalize and disenfranchise Black folks, that's not something that, whether you're Black, white, or in between, nobody wants to live in a place that is regressive. And I say this all the time. I don't mean it politically. I just mean it from like a sort of institutional perspective. We need to be more progressive. We need to emphasize that no matter what you look like, no matter what your gender is, that you can thrive and be successful here. We need to be a place where no matter where you come from, you can see yourself being just as successful and happy here as you might in an Atlanta or in a Houston or in a Miami, because that's who we're competing with now. We're not just competing with local towns. You're not just in Lafayette. You're not just competing with Alexandria or Opelousas. You're now competing with Atlanta. You're competing with, St. Louis or New York or Los Angeles. And if that doesn't seem fair, life's not fair. That's where we are right now. And so if you want to keep your young people, if you want people to stop leaving, if you want to get from 48th, 49th, and 50th and actually be a top 10 state, then you have to actually start implementing policies that reflect a more openness, a more progressive, small p progressive mindset that does say that we're not stuck in the 1950s and we are moving into the 21st century. And until that happens, you're going to get used to us always being at the bottom and us always ending every statement with, well, thank God for Mississippi. And that's not okay.
Yeah. Well, as a side note, the court just recently permanently blocks the environmental civil rights protection for Louisiana Black community. A U.S. District Judge, I'm just reading this out of the Advocate for the Western District of Louisiana, this week issued a permanent injunction thus prevent the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Justice, from using Title Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act to control how Louisiana regulates polluting facilities. And that comes as a blow because my good friends out there in the river parishes, Mr. Robert Taylor and the other sister who's been fighting for so long.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's some of these things because we have my district representative borders your new district. United States Representative Clay Higgins, who actually went on record saying he want to arrest the head of the EPA because the EPA has ruled against these big businesses out there. I mean, what an asinine representative we have from Louisiana, no wonder we last, to say something like that. And even when he was getting testimony, Brother Anderson, from a young lady with an environmental group, he disrespected the black woman. So we know what politicians we are dealing with. The question is, our elected officials, do they know who they are dealing with, and whether it's in Baton Rouge or D.C.?
When you say who they're dealing with, do you mean on the corporate end or on the vote on the community?
Community and corporate, you know, meaning having to deal with people who are so cold-hearted in a sense. I mean, you have to say Clay Higgins is cold-hearted if he's going to get angry at a protection organization, federal protect, trying to come in and protect the citizens who are dying from cancer, the black community in that district, where the company just raining down all types of pollution, and you got generational cancer and other afflictions in that area. When you have a cold-blooded person like Clay Higgins say some stuff like that, and plus disrespect a black woman, well, no wonder he engaged in police brutality as a member of our Opelousas Police Department. So you know the mentality, you know. So I'm just saying, I'm giving a lot of commentary because these are factual things. These are not things I'm making up in the top of my head. So.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I don't think that it's that they don't know who they're dealing with. I think that it's the care. And in this state, there is such an inappropriate relationship between oil and gas, to the point where there, you know, particularly between leaders and the oil and gas industry, there is a very clear devaluation of black lives. There's a very clear understanding that when we want to build a new plant, when we want to get rid of our waste, we do that in the black parts of town.
Right. And
the problem, and you know, not to continue to drive home the same narrative, but the problem is that our black leaders who represent those areas and are very powerful don't push back because they're given some good deal. Yes. Are there people going to be impacted? Yes. Are the cancer rates going to be higher? Yes. Are the asthma rates going to be higher? Yes. You know, are there other issues with you know, putting black communities in brownfields? Yes. But what I didn't tell you is I'm going to make you chairman of X, Y, and Z committee. And then all of a sudden, it's a good deal. Yeah. All of a sudden, it's a good deal. And that's inappropriate. I get that historically we have been mistreated, but that does not mean that that is the default option. We elect you because we expect you to fight for us. We expect you to represent us in a way that the people who normally engage with us don't. We expect you to treat us with a reverence that we normally don't get. That's why we're paying your salary. That's why we voted for you. And so as long as we keep on allowing our leaders to get away with a lack of representation in the face of those circumstances, when those companies come in and they're asking for expansions and they're asking for tax breaks and they're asking not to be held accountable for their carbon footprint, it needs to be our leaders, regardless of if you represent a river parish or not, because these are our people. It needs to be our leaders that say essentially over my dead body. And that's not what's happening. It's over our dead bodies, and they're still getting the benefits.
Yes. And again, when you see, and I'm going to try to let it go at them, try to bury this stuff because, you know, I'm probably going to get some feedback. When you see Clay Higgins actually get angry for something that's happening outside of his jurisdiction or his congressional district, that tells you a lot of how the lobbyists, the oil companies, and the other influencers and the political climate is driving people like Clay Higgins. But look, the thing I want to ask you also, your vision, your direction, where you would like to see the newly created 6th congressional district, and hopefully that congressional district can last without any some type of last-minute federal or some type of federal situation, because you've seen all kind of crazy stuff go on with the Supreme Court now, and you see these federal judges, Trump-appointed judges, ruling against the basic common sense or rule of law. So where do you want to see your 6th district, congressional district go for the people that you're going to represent?
Well, I think from because I'll answer it in sort of 2 parts. So just remind me if I forget to do the second part, which is about the future of the lines. But from a policy perspective and from a representation perspective, well, in 2 years, if I'm so honored to have gotten elected in November or December, what I hope the legacy of my service in that first term is pragmatism and progress. I come from a background of advocacy, but also, and maybe this is just my unique path, it was a background where my political mentors and my political sort of role models all said that a lack of progress was unacceptable. So, for example, in 2015, I served as campaign director for a school to prison pipeline campaign in Illinois. And that's not a state that I'm from. I don't have very many connections there. They just sort of tossed me in there and told me, all right, we need you to negotiate the end of this bill. Then we need you to whip enough votes, Democrats and Republicans, for it to pass and convince a Republican governor's office to sign it into law. So no small task. But what I learned during that process was that if you have to get something done, for example, like if you're fighting to raise the minimum wage and people simply cannot afford $7.25 anymore, then how do you address multiple people's interests that may not agree with you, may not be at the table for the same reasons that you are, may not share your ideology? And it was during that campaign that I learned how to address different people's interests without changing the substance of the bill, but still being able to address their interests to get them to a yes. And if I'm fighting on behalf of the people and the people want me to address blight, the people want me to address a lack of investment, the people want me to address environmental justice, if I'm fighting for the people and their issues are existential, I can't afford to say, well, I fought for 100% of what we wanted and nobody was willing to give me 100%. So I didn't get anything, but send me back for another 2 years and maybe this time I'll get 100%. As I've reminded people, I'm going to a chamber with 434 other people, and then there's 100 other people in the other chamber. You have to negotiate with those folks and their interests and their constituencies. It is unrealistic to expect you to get everything you want, but it's also unacceptable to not get something in every single negotiation on behalf of your constituents. So what I hope that people take away from my service is a sense of pragmatism and progress, that at every step of the way, he always moved the needle, whether it was an inch or a mile, he always got as much as he could in every single room he was in on our behalf. But from a geopolitical, or the political lines perspective of this district, I try not to lie to people. This district probably, almost certainly, is going to be redrawn in January by the Louisiana legislature. But what I warn people is, one, it's still under the court mandate to be a representative district for Black folks in this state. Now, what that looks like is where the fight is going to be, because conservatives are starting to make the argument that representative does not necessarily mean majority. So it could be a 45% Black district, maybe even a 40% Black district, and that would count. I don't believe that, not in this place like Louisiana, maybe in other places, but historically, for whatever reason, white folks have voted for white interests and against Black interests, and Black folks have voted for Black interests. And until that changes, I don't trust a district that is not majority Black to elect somebody that's going to represent Black interests. What I would like to see, if it does get redrawn, is at least a little bit more deference to the regional representation that I think some people had some issues with. A district that looks like this, the first thing that comes to mind to anybody that's not from Southeast Louisiana is that everybody in Shreveport, everybody in Alexandria, everybody in Lafayette, everybody in Opelousas is going to play second fiddle to the interests of those in Southeast Louisiana, because it's another one of those Black districts where all the population is in the Southeast. And so that representative isn't going to pay attention to North or Central. Yes. And one, if I get elected, I am going to make sure that we are heavily invested in all regions of this district. But two, I also don't want to disrespect that concern, because that concern is not arbitrary. It's born out of history. That has historically been what the case has been. So if we do redraw the lines, I do want to make sure that we're being respectful to the folks that do have concerns about a North Louisiana or Sinlaw district also having to share the attention with the Southeast Louisiana district, because I know what those concerns are, and I don't want them to feel as if they're being underrepresented.
Wow. I just can't understand, even, with the population of Louisiana, I sometimes wonder if we should have at least three, at least three, almost three, but yeah. Louisiana has been underrepresented for a long time, and I just know downwind there's some, somebody gonna throw a monkey wrench in the whole notion that we should have at least two, so that's my concern also. one of the things.
Just to say, I actually think that if we, because anybody who lives in Louisiana, I think would also agree, if we actually did make sure we balance racial representation with geographic representation,
Right.
I actually think you probably get closer to that. Because I think that a district that is fairly drawn, and let's say includes, Monroe in the northwest part of the
Right.
state, has a sizable black population now. One
Yes.
that is in the northeast. In the northwest part of the state, one that includes Shreveport is going to have a sizable population. And if you had one that was just a capital region based district, that would have a sizable black population. So if you draw it based on just like fair lines, you're not trying to make these weird looking districts.
Right.
You'd actually have more black folks in almost all of the districts, but they
Yes.
intentionally try to just put black folks in.
Yeah.
Well, before everybody was in the second district, and now trying to fit all of us into these two, what I like to call diaspora districts, all to sort of make it look like we're getting greater representation, but it then waters down our representation in the other four districts.
And so much I want to ask you, and I still didn't get a chance to ask Mr. Fields a lot of questions also, because we got some things at the top of the pyramid. One of the things I want to get your feelings on, and in the black community that I have my platform on, the questions of reparation. How you feel about that? You care to answer that one?
Yeah, no, absolutely, I'll answer. So I absolutely support reparations, but I'm also realistic. I don't know if white folks will ever get to a place where they are willing to write us a check for the pain and suffering of slavery. Regardless of how logical and justified it is, my whole life, that has always felt like one of those things where here in America, we just agree that while it needs to happen, it probably will never happen. What I will say is this: I do think that if we're able to frame it in a way where it's not cutting a check, maybe what it is it's college tuition. Those that are descendants of enslaved people, everybody gets sort of a free ride to a public college, something along those lines. That I could see being able to build the political support for, because it's not only about making right the wrong of slavery and segregation, but it's also there's an economic incentive on the part of the state to invest in black folks so that we are en masse doing better economically. And from their perspective, we're paying more in taxes and that sort of thing. So I do think that if there are ways that we can get reparations through resources like education, like home ownership, like maybe access to capital for small business owners and entrepreneurs, I think that is probably the more likely political solution that is more palatable for a lot of white folks. For whatever reason, a lot of white folks think that, a few hundred years of slavery does not warrant, making it right economically. And that is a fight that I think that we should continue to fight because it's the right one. But I also think that we should have our expectations set at a realistic level, which is most white folks, for whatever reason, they're never going to get on board with this idea of writing $1 trillion check to Black America. So let's figure out how we can, get our proverbial bag in some way that doesn't make people feel as uncomfortable, but still does, I think, address the issue of the long-term consequences of slavery.
You're listening to a young man, a young brother, I call him young brother, Quentin Anderson, candidate for the newly created 6th Congressional District of Louisiana, and it encompasses part of North Lafayette. And I'm joined by my co-host, Keith Falk, who usually my co-host on Saturdays, but Sister Khadijah's not here. And Brother Keith Falk, I think that falls in one of your old districts. Correct. Say hi to Brother Anderson.
Good morning, Brother Anderson.
Can you hear?
Hey, good morning.
Can you hear?
Yeah, I heard it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, newly created 6th Congressional District. I think the positive part is that we could possibly send somebody to Washington that looks like us, from this area, from this part of the state. So that's one positive thing about the district. But one negative thing is if you see what's been phasing out through the courts, through the lawsuits, um, the district can be redefined to where it takes away some of the geographical background from power from black folks to control the district, where it could send another Caucasian candidate to Washington if things play out in the court the way the conservatives in the favor of the conservatives.
Yeah, you got his question.
A little bit. It was breaking up a little bit.
Okay.
It sounded
yeah,
like,
yeah. We're changing mic. Go ahead, Mr. Anderson. Go ahead. If you could, whatever you could gather from the question, you got to answer it again.
It sounded like he was concerned about the possibility that at some point this district could fall into the hands of white folks.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And sorry for not catching all of it.
Correct. Correct. That's correct.
Technical glitch. That's all.
So this is. I mean, I think. Yeah. I think this is a relevant question because it really does piggyback off of what we were just talking about. So I want to be clear. In 2022, a federal court mandated that Louisiana needed to create this district, that we had been grossly underrepresenting our black population in the state, and that we needed to have at least an additional congressional district that reflected the will of Louisiana's black population. So that court mandate still exists, no matter what. What did not have to happen was kind of, some of the other machinations that happened around this district, who got to draw the lines and things like that. But what still exists is the mandate that we have a congressional district that will be representative of the black population. As I was saying before, the fight is going to be on the legal interpretation of what percentage of black voters that has to be. I think that you have some conservatives that are making the argument that it's closer to 45%. And obviously black folks and most political analysts and legal scholars think that it needs to be well over 50% just because of the history of the state. The biggest thing that I will say is when you have these majority black districts that are sort of barely majority black, after redistricting, now both the second and the sixth are, I think, only 54 and 52% black respectively. The issue that you may have is that still does open up the door, obviously, for, in a divided race, for a white person to be able to emerge, for a Republican to be able to emerge. And that's just the nature of the numbers. What I don't want, and I'm trying to be careful about the way I talk about it, is because we've gotten so used to certain type of leadership, what I don't want is, I don't want us thinking, okay, ahead of every election, we need to just sort of decide which black person we're going to get behind and kind of circumvent these elections. I still want us to have that robust conversation ahead of every election about what the nature of our representation is and if this person is the right person to represent us. And I do get that in our community, that scares people sometimes, because that means, oh boy, we got two black folks running against each other, and then we got this rich white boy who's just waiting in the wings. But we owe it to ourselves to, one, be able to have that conversation, but two, once we've decided who is the candidate that best represents us, being able to coalesce behind that candidate in a democratic way at the ballot box to being able to advance our interests. But I don't want us being so scared of electing a white person that we start to elect bad black folks, because that's what we've been doing. We need to be able to have this vetting process where we are talking to, where we are asking all of our candidates how they're going to represent us. And we need to not be afraid of that competition, because that's how we get the best representation. But I'm not as worried in the short term. Like in this race, all five of us are black. So no matter what happens, a black person will represent us. One of us is a Republican that's not really talking about local issues. I'm not a big fan of that, but all of us are black. Moving forward, though, it is something to be mindful of. And that is why that percentage is such a big deal. The closer that percentage is to 50 or less than 50, the harder it will be to make sure that the outcomes of those elections are a true reflection of the interests of our community.
And I agree with you, Mr. Anderson, especially about the fact
to where because there's a Caucasian in the in the race, and he could possibly win, and there's two black candidates in the race. We gonna just pick any candidate because I've always felt the idea of just because they of the same culture, or or of the same party as us, we just pick any one of that candidate because that's what we're known to roll with. And sometime your own kind, I mean, from your own background, from your own culture, some of those candidates are not really good for us.
I mean, what's the old saying? All skin folk ain't kinfolk.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay. And again, you're candidate for the 6th Congressional District, a young brother who has an impressive resume. He's pro-business. What would you do to bring business, I'm at a crossroad to say, well, let's bring some business in. But you know what, we get caught up talking about the lobbyists in Baton Rouge or D.C. What can you do, and what do you see? Can you identify as a situation to bring businesses to Louisiana, especially to our community, the district that you're going to serve, which is sometimes it can be underserved?
Yeah. So, and I always try not to overpromise
Yes.
because I want people to understand the kind of the distinctions between the different offices and where kind of the most influences is why voting in local elections is so important. Most of the policies that will most directly generate economic growth are going to be formulated and implemented at the local and state level. But what the federal government can do is we can have the resources available to incentivize a lot of the visions and plans that are being laid at the local and state level. So, for example, at the federal level, we can expand what the tax opportunities are, the tax incentives are for opportunity zones. We can expand what those opportunity zones are. And what opportunity zones are just areas that are usually historically black, historically disinvested. And what the federal government says is we're going to give you more money and better terms to start your businesses there. Now, the problem with that, just in a vacuum, is that if you're just sort of saying, hey, if you say you want to, let's take a grocery store in a food desert. You say you want to open up a grocery store in a food desert. We'll give you the money. We'll give you the resources to do it. But we also don't change the environment around that area to make sure that that supermarket is actually successful. And if we continue to do that, we're just throwing bad money into sort of a proverbial pit. What I want to make sure that we're doing is we're investing in the things that we know just intimately have a direct impact on the success of said supermarket. I want to make sure we have federal dollars available to revitalizing our public transit systems in places like Lafayette, Alexandria, Shreveport, and Baton Rouge. Heck, I want to see us bring rail to some of these cities. I want to see us building sidewalks. I want to make sure that foot traffic is a big deal for these small businesses. I want to make sure that we're making it easier for folks that may not have a vehicle to still access these businesses in these parts of town where there's economic opportunities. I want to make sure that we're actually investing in our roads and we're investing in broadband. So some of the infrastructure things that just bring us into the 21st century so that it's easier for these black businesses and businesses that are investing in black communities to be successful. Right now, if we just incentivize you building a new business in the hood, you may not be there in 6 months, but you got all the tax benefits.
Right.
We need to make sure that when we're incentivizing new businesses, new jobs in our communities, that we're also prioritizing the sustainability of those things. How do we make sure that supermarket stays?
Brother Anderson, I think we got a
call.
constituent from your neck of the woods where you're running at, and he wants to talk to you on the line. Go ahead, caller. Welcome, Brother Nat.
How you doing, Mr. Anderson and Mr. Leroy?
Good. Good. Thank you for calling.
My concern is on the local level.
Yep.
What can you do to bring better jobs to our district? Because guess what? The Bible says, money has solved that. We don't have money. If you look at these districts for the black people, there's no money for us to survive. You know, I have a son that had to move out of state because he went to college, although thank God he didn't have no student loans, but he couldn't make a living, a decent living here, without working 12 hours a day and putting overtime. So my thing is, we need money. And I know you can't do it on a local level, but would you be the catalyst to bring in more jobs towards this area? Because we have a lot of jobs down south. But we don't have many manufacturing companies towards this area. In the Alexandria, we got Procter & Gamble and stuff like that. But without money, man, look, we don't have nothing. And as far as you saying that, like, we have all the black candidates, sometimes we got to look at who's getting financed by these black candidates that's running for office.
Okay.
You know, everybody that look like it ain't really for you. If you get what I'm saying.
Okay. You want to take his answer off air, Brother Nat?
No, I.
Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead.
You can do it online.
Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. Like I said, I think from a federal perspective, there is some limitations, and you acknowledge that, so I appreciate that. But with those opportunity zones, one of the things that you can do, like any sort of grant program, you can include the requirements that you want to see happening on the ground so that it has that trickle-down effect. So if we make the opportunity zone tax incentives attractive enough, we can say things like, you know, you get more money if you pay your employees at least a living wage. You get more money or you get better terms if you are willing to offer job training, if you're willing to match the cost of living or something like that. And so that is, I think those are things that we can do. They're not guarantees. Again, anything that's a federal incentive means that folks have to actually be incentivized to apply for it. They have to actually be incentivized to want to go for it. The bar is always set at the state level. But one area where we can raise that bar to address something that you just mentioned is the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage. And I am a huge proponent of a living wage. And a living wage means that it's not just, a hard number. It's always tied to the cost of living. And I want to see that happen. I want to see a living wage pass at the federal level so that at the very least, while you're still going to have companies in certain places trying to lowball people, how low they lowball people is going to still have a limit based on federal policy. Oh, I'm getting a little bit of echo.
I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No worries.
Yeah, and I know you want to answer this question, but we got another caller on the line.
Before.
Go ahead, caller.
I'm glad y'all got him on, but y'all refused to hear what he just said, that the districting that was district up was by white people. Mm-hmm. And he said he got 5 black people running. 4 of those are not for us as people. 4 of those are being sponsored by the white candidates. And what we don't understand as black folks, these people know all that we're going through in the district and everything. But the thing is to get us appeased and excited to go vote for a candidate that's going to sell it out. And I don't know this young man, but he talks almost like a good white politician. And I like that because he's selling y'all the narrative that y'all really believe that these white folks want us to be in their system. Their job is to live off of us. And we got to understand that no matter what politician they pick, they're still beneath the white folks in this politics. They're tokens to these people. And that's why they got these 5 black people running against each other to make us think they're going to change things for black people. If we don't catch our head and realize that we are the only ones can help us, not politics, they're going to keep disrespecting us and keep disrupting us. Their job is to make sure black people stay in bondage and at the bottom. And we got to understand that. And stop letting these people play with us every time they come for politics. All of them coming out the closet, sponsored by white folks.
All right.
And thank y'all for not hanging up.
All right. Thank you, caller. Yeah. You're going to get that on next Wednesday.
Right,
you got a person that hangs up on you. Thank you anyway.
Mr. Anderson, can I address that right quick? Yes, to me, sound like, and I'm not endorsing him. It's not, but to me, sound like the candidate that we have on the phone, sound like he got some good ideas of moving forward. But on the other hand, it's not this. It's not a government that we can choose not to participate in, or we can choose to participate in. If you live in the United States, you're part of the government no matter whether you choose not to participate or to participate. There's laws you got to follow. There's things you need to survive while you're here. So if you live in the United States, you automatically a part of the system. Okay, Mr. Anderson?
Yeah. Um, I guess are you are you are you asserting like that's the reason why we need to have higher participation? We need to be more engaged.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and I think also to kind of observe what the last caller said. I think that the onus is on us to be vigilant because you are going to have folks that, and this historically happens in our community, folks that look like us, folks that have a bunch of money so they can make sure that the only people you know are those folks, and they will then just give you a bunch of word salad. When you ask them a question, they'll just kind of mumble some stuff, and they know how to speak English well, but they're just saying words. They're not giving you an answer to the questions. I think the onus on us, because we can't always blame the politicians because we're the ones that vote for them, is to actually be honest and objective about our analysis of them when they're running. Because after they've gotten elected, they've gotten what they want. So it's going to be a whole lot harder to hold them accountable once they've gotten elected. But it's during elections, which is oftentimes where we kind of get into autopilot mode, right? Pastor says we're voting for this person, so I guess that's who we're voting for. I was just talking to my dad about that. He says that's been going on in our community for 100 years. Somebody says this is who we're voting for, and that's who we're voting for. And we don't really question it. But when we do that, we do embolden and empower people that take advantage of our apathy, people who take advantage of our trust. Our trust that if you look like us and you sound like you know what you're talking about, then you're probably representing our interests properly behind closed doors. That's not happening, and so we have to make sure. Let's make a point in this election. No matter how familiar you are with a candidate, making sure that everybody starts with not a clean slate, but with open eyes. That you are looking at each candidate and you're looking, where do you stand on this issue that matters to me and my family? And regardless of what your history is with that candidate, making sure that their answer aligns with your interests. And if they don't, then keep it moving. Look at the next one. And if nobody is, then demand accountability and make sure that these candidates are actually talking about the issues that you care about. But if we're not holding our candidates accountable, it's really hard for us to get upset after Election Day when they don't expect to be held accountable.
Yeah, some of us want the trains to run on time, a.k.a. Germany and Hitler. We want the trains to run on time. We want the red lights to work. A lot of us say we're not going to participate in this system because you on social media, Brother Anderson, I'm sure you've seen that too. With this new election cycle on the national and federal level and local level, you've seen a lot of pushback in our community, our conscious black community, that people are getting angry with you because you say you're going to vote for a particular candidate. Now, my thing is this. If you're not going to be a part of that conversation, or why get angry at the people who discussing it? An A and B conversation should not dictate a C person coming in and dictating to the A and B conversation. But that's the way it is. We are pushing more hard on each other than we're pushing on the candidates that's making these or pushing these bad laws. So I don't know how you do it, brother.
And let me say this, Brother G. Let me iterate this right quick. If you
your mic, yeah, I got your mic turned up too much. Full blast.
If you obtain, if you have a driver's license, if you drive, if you're employed, if you receive some type of benefit or from the federal government, if you have an identification card, if you have a green card, everything you do
is participating in this government.
It revolves around being part of the system. So instead of we encourage our people not to vote, we encourage them to look at the background of each candidate and go do your homework, do your research, and how you feel the decisions that's going to be made on your behalf should be made after doing that candidate's research. And if you feel that candidate is going to make the decision that you feel should be made, well, then that's the candidate you go for. You go out and vote. But if you're not going to vote, don't try to discourage others not to vote.
Oh yeah.
I'll get angry at him, man.
And that's a disturbing trend,
Yeah.
particularly, and that's one that I have to address, particularly with younger voters.
Yeah.
I get the cynicism, but it's only going to be worse when you don't vote your interest. Like this idea that checking out somehow will, incentivize politicians to pay more attention to your interests. That's not the way that it is. When you check out, you no longer matter to those politicians.
And there are a lot of bad actors and situations out there pushing the narrative, even in the presidential election. You got Russian bots out there, and people do your research, Russian bots, algorithms on social media that's telling you this person is worse than the other person, and there are no factual proof, but having clicks over here who are telling you don't participate or don't vote or this person did that. Pay attention, do your research, stop following the social media algorithms, and vote with your head. Vote if your pocketbooks is doing all right. Vote if you don't have any laws that put you in some type of severe constraint. So I just wanted to add that because this show has turned into not talking about Brother Quentin Anderson, more about how people are pushing back on this election cycle.
And
Brother Quentin.
And then also let me say this. You got candidates that you send them to fill that position, and they actually go to work for the people that elected them. Right, Brother Anderson?
Yeah. No, sorry about that. I didn't know if that was a question for me.
Yeah. No, we're just making an observation. That's all. Don't mind our venting.
But I think at the end of the day, participation is key. I think no matter what, I do want to make sure that people understand that you only get these bad outcomes when you don't pay attention. The only reason we're having this conversation is because, very rarely, unfortunately, in our community, very rarely do these elections come down to substance and a debate about the issues. They become about, Uncle so-and-so, or this person's known my family this long, or this person does a turkey giveaway. And it has to be more about our interests. How is this person going to vote on this? What are they going to pursue when it comes to, blight and crime? Like it has to be about the details. And we lower the bar too much for our leaders. I think sometimes because we sometimes think, well, a good politician in the black community might not be as smart or as articulate, and that's as anti-black on our part as the stuff that white folks do. Right. We have to believe that we can elect really, really good representatives that are smart, informed, and passionate about their advocacy, instead of thinking that the best that we can do is old Senator, Leroy, who's been there for 40 years and he's just doing the best that he can. It has to be people that objectively can do the job. And we have to not be afraid of firing people when they're not doing the job.
Yes. So what would you want the general public to know about Quentin Anderson and what he will do to win favor with the voters?
I think the thing that I want voters to know is that as much as humanly possible, I'm trying to do this the right way because I respect the process. Because I respect the job, I respect the process. I think that if I'm going to be accessible to you after the election, I need to be accessible to you now. If I'm going to respect you and sort of, I'm a preacher's kid. If I'm going to wash your feet after the election, I need to wash your feet now. That's one of the reasons why when I'm not wearing a suit and tie, I am in shorts and a cutoff shirt knocking on doors myself. I was just out in Karen Crow maybe a week and a half ago, just knocking on doors, and people were surprised because they were like, well, aren't you the candidate? And I was like, yes, but I respect you enough to ask you for your vote directly. And that's the way that I want to serve. I get that we have a history of disappointment from our leaders, and there's nothing I can do about that. I can't do anything about our past. But I know the way that I was raised. I'm the son and grandson of preachers. I was raised to serve. I was raised that servant leadership is the best kind of leadership. And I've tried to demonstrate that throughout this campaign, and that's what I want to do for the people of the 6th District, for my people here in Louisiana. I don't have a whole lot of money. I don't have a whole lot of name recognition, but what I do have is a passion for my community, and I think I'm informed enough on the issues where I can represent us to the best of my ability and unapologetically when those doors close.
Yes, yes. I know we left out a question. Because I was trying to give you similar question to we gave State Senator Fields last week. One more thing, Key,
Yes, sir.
that I think we should ask. The issue in our community, police accountability. We know that was on the table in the last session. Session when we had the newly elected Congressman Cori Bush, Jerome Bowman. We saw what happened to them. They got targeted. They got a ton of money thrown against them. How will you operate in a climate like that? No, you being a young progressive, my favor, and I'm saying, not endorsing you, but I favor progressive candidates other than candidates who, might go along with the system. So how would you operate in a Congress where there's not a lot of favor to more progressives?
And then a second part to that question too.
I know you got a lot.
What can be done to toughen up on these law enforcement officers and not just officers, agencies and departments that have these hideaway spots, hideaway areas? What can we do where they take
talking about Baton Rouge Brave Cave?
The Brave Cave.
Oh, yeah.
You know, things that have came out about here in Lafayette where an officer then went to an area where they thought was undisclosed, discreet, and violated the rights of an individual. What can be done about that, in your best perspective?
I think that's a really great question. So a couple of things. First, I want to remark on the Brave Cave situation because that's right here at home, and that was probably one of the most disappointing developments of the last few years, particularly because the current mayor was elected in the wake of Alton Sterling, and so I think there was an expectation that if nothing else happened, the issue of police brutality and the relationship between the community and law enforcement needed to be addressed in her administration. And for that to happen, for there to be a torture chamber in North Baton Rouge where they were explicitly torturing Black folks, that's a hard one to recover from. So it'll be interesting to see how they discuss that in the local mayoral race, because I do think that that's a huge deal. But to address two things: one, the efficacy of a progressive in Congress, and two, what to actually do about this issue. First, what I tell people is, I get that people label me as a progressive, and I don't push back against it because I think that most of my positions probably do fall into that category.
It's a good thing, man. It's a good thing.
Yeah. No. And I don't mind it. I guess my thing is, I'm a progressive, but it's not because that's my goal. It's just that's where I land on the issues. But my goal is never to go into a room and be the most progressive any more than I respect somebody who's trying to be the most conservative. My goal is to get an outcome. And for me, always, like I mentioned before, I'm always pragmatic. I want to get what I can get in the room as it is. And I have experience having done that. I think the thing that we can get done, because there was a lot of support built for it over the last few years, and I think that increasingly common sense conversations are building support for it, is the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which addresses a lot of the things that you were talking about. And the reason I just mentioned legislation that exists already is I also want to show that I don't believe that I'm going to dictate the terms in Congress. If sometimes I don't have to reinvent the wheel, if there's a good solution on the table, then building on the support that existed before so that we could actually get it over the hump, as opposed to starting from scratch because I need, I don't know, I need credit for it. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act does a couple things. It bans chokeholds and no-knock warrants, particularly on stuff like the Brave Cave. It reforms qualified immunity so that cops have to think, I might actually personally be liable for breaking the law here. Right now, when a cop breaks the law, they can just say, I was doing so as a cop, so you're going to have to talk to my department. And that protects them from so much. And then making sure that we're not selling, prohibiting the sale of military equipment to law enforcement. because I think that all that you're doing is when somebody has a machine gun, they want to use a machine gun. When somebody has a tank, they want to use a tank. If we don't give them those resources, then you have to use what you have. And then I guess the last thing I'd say is my approach to policing has always been that I think that we are doing a disservice to law enforcement when we expect law enforcement to address literally everything, including preventing crime. That's not their job. Their job is not to prevent crime. If you ask the police officer what your job is, it's to address crime. When a crime happens, you call the police come, they investigate it, they figure out what happened, and even then, they are not holistic, they hand it off to a prosecutor. We have to understand that law enforcement is but a component of public safety. Yeah. And if we actually want to improve outcomes in our community, we can't just rely on law enforcement to do everything. Law enforcement are not mental health professionals. Law enforcement can't address the economic desperation that leads people down criminal paths. Law enforcement can't address recidivism. Mm-hmm. All law enforcement can do is address crime. So if we want to actually address public safety, then we have to have a more holistic approach to public safety that does include economic development, that does include education, that does include healthcare outcomes, because all of it has a contribution to that final result of lowering crime and increasing public safety.
Yes. Wow. That's a lot, brother. I'm glad. When you ask, Brother Keith, when you ask someone who's running for office a question and they give you an in-depth answer like that, they are ready. So I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
Look, my brother, we want to keep you longer because you apparently are probably on the road or something like that, and we really appreciate you coming on 88.3 KIEE FM, your super station for South Louisiana. Hopefully the people in the northern part of the listening area got a lot out of your comments and issues today that you talked about. We really appreciate you, and we don't want you to be a stranger to 88.3 FM. Please drop by, say hello, introduce yourself to us. Brother Keith?
Absolutely. And I appreciate y'all having me on. And if next time I'm in Lafayette, I do want to stop by. I meant to do that today. I'm just having very normal person car problems. Yeah, but I appreciate y'all's flexibility and accommodation.
I understand that, my brother. Thank you.
Thank you, brother, for coming on and expressing your goals and what you can do if you is elected to this new created congressional district.
Good luck too, brother.
Good luck.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for having me.
All right. Thank you.
And then good morning to those of you who just tuning in, checking it in. Brother J. Keith Folk, open line.
Sister Khadija she'll be back soon. she gonna have that taskmaster whip on us and ask us if we have broken any dishes in the kitchen. Listen, I want to also say salute to our staff and management, Mr. Charles and Mr. John Freeman, for helping facilitating these great shows. Not only the Open Line Radio Show, we got Business to Business with Mr. June Andrews every Friday from 1 to 3 also. So these talk shows hopefully is getting the information out, Brother Keith. And hopefully you'll be back on Saturday on the People's Tech and Entertainment Show. We need to talk about more about these algorithms out there that's driving the narrative on social media. Because sometimes we think it's a real thing, it's a real person, but it's a computer program, which is an algorithm, and I don't want to get too technical today, that are driving these social norms that we, not normal, when you have people actually in one click hating on another click because they're saying you're voting for this person or you are supporting this issue.
But Brother Jay, just to stay on the national standpoint before we switch over to local, but looking at some of these, I've been watching it, watching some of these algorithms on social media, then going back and actually researching and listening to some of those speeches, and a lot of these algorithms make you think one person did so much that was so good for a certain select of people, and which that person or that president didn't do nothing.
You even got what people would call trusted sources that are questionable. Look, Elon Musk. there's a lot of allegation that he's letting people come on Twitter and put all types of AI generated images of some of the politicians.
Look, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, Mark
just coming
Zuckerberg,
out.
Yeah.
That news just broke yesterday afternoon.
Right. So we got to pay attention in this political because a lot is at stake. A lot is at stake. Because we go after we run these right here. We'll be right back. I want to talk. Come back, Brother Keith, and open up the lines and just talk about the new signing by this governor of basically outlawing whatever the hell that means. Outlawing CRT. How you could outlaw a thought? So we're going to talk about that and ask the general public what they think on that. So we'll be right back here on the Open Line Radio Show.